rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Hey, look at that. More Rebel Force Radio coming at you here. Can't get enough of us, can you? Oh, we do the after show, then we do a weekly podcast. We love it. We love it. And we love you for listening. So thanks for hanging with us with the RFR double feature this week. We can't promise that every week. You know, summertime. Got things, but we certainly won't be missing an episode of The Acolyte. We are committed, as we have been really since the very first Star Wars television series, going all the way back to the Clone Wars. And we have really not missed an episode of Star Wars television yet. I will say, and this was my fault, I said no to doing Resistance. And I don't know. You can judge for yourself whether that was a good idea or not. But that was one where I pretty much said no. If we're doing it, I won't be participating in it. But happy to be doing all of these series. I mean, it really is. It's incredible. It's like a time capsule, and we hear from listeners all the time that jump in. Some of them as recently as in the last year or so, and then they go back and they re-listen to not just the regular podcast, but all the after shows, and because it's a time capsule in the sense that we've just seen the episode. Sometimes that night, sometimes that we recorded, or sometimes within the first 24 hours or so. So it's all very, very fresh, and we don't have the benefit of having watched the whole series and talking about it. So it's very raw, and that's exactly what we're doing with The Acolyte. So make sure you're checking us out. We're there Wednesday nights, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So that's the after show. This is the regular flagship podcast, the weekly show. We've been doing it for, 17, 18 years now. I don't know. I don't even keep track anymore. People say, how many episodes have you done? I have no idea how many episodes we've done. I'm not interested in knowing. All I know is that I have a great time each and every week with you all. And this guy, and by this guy I mean my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Yeah, back again for another round of Rebel Force Radio. And we got a good one for you guys this week. Coming up, we got F.J. DeSanto joining us, filmmaker, Hollywood insider, F.J. DeSanto, friend of Rebel Force Radio. He'll be joining us for a little Prophet or Loser, The Acolyte edition. F.J. has a lot of things to say about The Acolyte, and so we need to unleash him on this episode. And he's pumped up, and he's ready to talk about everything from the development of the series to the fan reaction, the fallout, and his predictions for where the story is heading. So always great to hear from FJ. I love to hear from him and his no BS insight that he gives us into storytelling and the process of filmmaking and his life as a Star Wars fan. And he is tops at all of the above. Plus, we have some interview highlights from Dave Filoni and Hayden Christensen. They're out on this promotion tour trying to raise awareness in AHSOKA so that show will get nominated for an Emmy or whatever they're fishing for. So Lucasfilm is trotting out Hayden, Rosario, and Filoni. We have a few highlights from Dave and Hayden. Plus a little bit of listener feedback. Hopefully Star Wars and pop culture. We keep having to shelve that every week because there's just been so much to talk about in the realm of Star Wars. So we haven't been able to focus on pop culture, but we want you guys to keep sending your suggestions. We're saving them all. We have a big supply of Star Wars and pop culture, so I hope we can pick away at that a little bit this week. But you know, the thing I love the most about doing the after show is not only being able to have a conversation with you, Jason, every week where we can trade notes about things that we have observed happening in the latest Star Wars streaming series or even films when those come back, but it's the ability to hear from our audience live. And they, you know, we have an open switchboard, and our buddy Tyler Page is there manning the switchboard for each and every after show, and we talk to our audience in real time. And I think that's a great thing that we do every week. But I don't want to just limit that to the after shows. I'd like to dive into some voicemail and hear what some of the Rebel Force Radio audience has to say about the Acolyte or anything. So you want to jump into some listener feedback?
Let's do it.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message? Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Chut, Jason, and Jimmy. This is Fletcher from Maryland. Just wanted to say two things really quick. First off, I'm a brand new Patreon member, and I'm absolutely loving the content that you all provide on there. If anyone is on the fence, highly recommend joining it. I am in a stress and emotionally heavy job, and getting a chance to listen to all this bonus content and just laugh with people within the Star Wars fandom just gives me a lot of joy. So if you're on the fence, just go ahead and do it. It's absolutely worth it. On top of that, I also wanted to share a quick thought with the Acolyte, specifically as it relates to Yoda. I know that there's a lot of people thinking that Yoda might not show up because Lucasfilm has a lot of fear of legacy characters. And while I think that's part of it, I'm also seriously doubting if Yoda as a character would even end up fitting the vibe or the tone that they're going for in the show, in the fact that it at least feels like they're showing the Jedi as an organization as really corporate and absent of almost the spiritual aspect involved with the Force and the Jedi. And I'm not sure if Yoda's really going to fit in that mold at this point. I would love to hear what you guys think on the likelihood or unlikelihood of us seeing Yoda within the Acolyte. And once again, everyone listening, if you haven't joined Patreon, go ahead and join it. If Kitster was here, he would be part of Patreon, and he would tell you bums to join it too. Hope you all have a great day. May the Force be with you.
Wow, what a call. Thanks, Fletcher. That is awesome. Really appreciate it. Thank you for all of the kind words about Patreon. Yes. Well, as far as Yoda fitting in and corporate and all of that, something that I've always found interesting about the prequels, in particular, the difference between Qui-Gon Jinn and the rest of the Jedi Council, is that I've always thought, and midichlorian sort of fits into this, that at the time of the prequels, at least, that the Jedi were perhaps straying away, or I don't know, I don't have enough historical context. They're either straying away from the more metaphysical, spiritual, or perhaps they hadn't quite found it yet at that point. So the Yoda that we meet in The Empire Strikes Back, which is very, very much almost what's that?
Like a priest almost.
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah, he's all about
him,
the spiritual side. Luminous beings were we. We're not physical. He never talks about midichlorians. So I've always felt that the midichlorians themselves were sort of an example of how the Jedi were looking for some sort of scientific way to sort of prove spirituality, in a sense, like people that go looking for God with telescopes and things like that. Well, if I can't see heaven with this incredible invention, then it doesn't exist. So in that sense, yeah, I would say that these Jedi are still somewhat on par with what we see in the Phantom Menace and in the prequels. So Yoda's there, but I don't think he's evolved into the Yoda that we sort of, a lot of us, I think, really think of when we think of Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't see this being a radically different vibe from the Jedi that we see in the prequels. I hear people say that, but Jim, I don't necessarily think that they're really much different at all.
No. Well, not from the limited exposure we've had to the Jedi thus far in the Acolyte.
Right.
They seem a little heavy-handed, but I think the Jedi in the prequels were a little heavy-handed at times. And that, to me, seems kind of consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not Yoda's going to fit in, I mean, obviously he evolves through the Force. But who's to say, like, back in the prequel era, Qui-Gon Jinn is taking blood from Anakin Skywalker to test for his midichlorians. Maybe back even in that era, Yoda scoffed at that idea. Oh, you need technology to tell you can't feel the Force flowing from this person? Can't you evaluate them on those standards as opposed to using a tool, man-made tool technology to measure someone's connection to the Force? But by that time, the Jedi had become something of a bureaucracy, and these were certain statistics that you had to surpass to be able to join the order. They simplified it. They made it routine. It became
they had to
this
systematize it. Yeah, they had to systematize it.
Yes, and that's where the Jedi are falling short because they're losing their one-on-one connection with the Force, and they're letting too many middlemen interfere via government, technology, politicians, or even emotional attachment to certain people. These are things that would screw up a Jedi. To be, they talk about how Jedi should not have the attachments. Well, I think the Jedi became attached to the teat of the Republic government. They were attached to the whole system. The Jedi who went off on their own to find themselves via meditation or isolation, those are the Jedi who connected with the Force in a profound way and lived up to what I think is the original standard of being a Jedi. Maybe this is stuff the James Mangold show movie will investigate. The pure connection between man, person, and the Force itself.
Well, I keep waiting for us to see the Jedi in their prime. I remember when George Lucas was talking about the prequels, we're going to finally see the Jedi in their prime. But there's a big asterisk there. The shroud of the dark side had fallen, and their ability to use the Force had been diminished, and all of that. We know that. So they're in the midst of, they don't know it necessarily. They're starting to figure it out, but they're in the midst of a lot of upheaval. The same could be said for the Jedi here, because I was shocked when we saw them testing blood, and which obviously is about checking the midichlorian count and stuff for the kids. I thought if we saw Jedi 100 years prior to the Phantom Menace, they would be much, much more in the Qui-Gon vein, where very much connected to the Force, very much instinctual, very much not reliant on technology. So, yeah, I think Yoda will, I guess that's a long way of saying I think Yoda will fit just right into the world of the Acolyte, to be honest.
Well, maybe these are the things that necessitate the whole concept of Lucasfilm chasing the idea of creating a film about the origin of the Jedi and the origin of people's connection to the Force and being able to use it. Maybe all of these shows and the questions they create start to necessitate that, to where we see actual, like, the most purest of Jedi, the ones who aren't corrupted by government or status or, living in the high rise in Coruscant. These guys, these early Jedi might be the purest form of Force user that we'll ever see.
One thing that's really, I hope they build on this a bit more. I don't know that they'll have time with the Acolyte, but up until this series, I wasn't thinking about the idea that there would be lots of Jedi temples throughout the galaxy. When I think of the Jedi temple, I think of the one on Coruscant. Yes, that's the capital planet. But I wasn't thinking about the possibility of there being almost like different subcultures of Jedi based on what temple they're in. So that's also a possibility. It could be that they start to rot from the center, from the central position there on Coruscant, that could be where the seeds of the corruption are actually planted, and then it would impact the outlying temples perhaps later downstream of what's going on Coruscant. But again, something that George didn't have time to talk about in the prequels, and we may not get much more exposure to that in Acolyte either.
Well, I don't know, because like the High Republic represents a certain era. And in this era, Jedi temples were all over the galaxy. By the time we get to the prequels, they've closed down a lot of that business that was going on. And the Jedi themselves, and the Jedi themselves become much smaller in ranks by the time you get to the prequel era. And, there have been moments in the past where old Jedi temples were rediscovered. I think about the Jedi temple that Ezra and Kanan discovered on Lothal. Yeah, it was those mounds, and they, and Yoda was hanging out in there. A projection of Yoda was.
Yeah, he was.
So, I mean, there's something special about these temples wherever they're scattered throughout the galaxy, that they become sort of an antenna for the Force, maybe, or something that really focuses the Force.
They were probably chosen. I'm guessing that the locations of these were probably chosen very specifically as well, given perhaps how strong that area resonated with the Force. We know that physical locations can. What does Qui-Gon say about Mortis? It's a how does he describe it? Something of the Force.
It's like a convergence.
Convergence.
I think he might have said.
Yeah, so I think this phenomenon, in other words, in the temple where Yoda or Grogu sends out his message to, which ends up being Luke Skywalker. Again, another place that the physical location is significant in terms of its connection to the Force and all that. So yeah, I don't think they were.
Those are things that they can explore, and I think that temple, the original Jedi temple on Ahch-To, had some sort of, there was something there. Yoda says the Force, it connects everything: tree, the rock, you, me, everything. And I think that's really interesting. We're seeing, you have to keep reminding yourself when you're watching the Acolyte, you're seeing a different era of Jedi. This is the High Republic era, and it's the end of the High Republic era.
Right.
So there has to be some real consequential stuff happening that's going to necessitate even like the public perception of a change in eras, or the Jedi perception of a change in eras. I do think we might see Yoda, and he'll show up in like some Jedi Council scene where they're all sitting in the circle, just like we saw him introduced in The Phantom Menace. In one of the latter episodes of The Acolyte, we'll see this, where the Jedi are making a harsh decision about something. And it all comes down to like a very bureaucratic take on the situation. And Yoda will let it be known that he does not agree with this method of assessing the situation. He might even look at the camera and go like, it might be something.
Sort of grunt of disapproval.
Something to indicate to us that whatever the Jedi are doing in this era is something Yoda does not believe is the right path for the order to be taken.
Yeah.
So I hear what the caller is saying, Fletcher, about Yoda not fitting in with this High Republic thing. But, I mean, that might be the whole point, that Yoda doesn't fit in because he's above it all. And that's how I always like to perceive the character of Yoda. He's above it all.
Not literally.
That's my Yoda.
He's under a lot of.
Well, I know he's a little guy. He's short to the ground, but he can float around and stuff. I've seen that happen.
All right,
and then he's got a little sled he sits in where he can kind of float along with you.
Yeah, I need one of those.
Remember in Attack of the Clones?
Yeah, I love that. The little hover chair
little
thing.
Floating. Yeah, that was good stuff. So,
all right,
never underestimate
that was
Yoda.
Fletcher. You've got something from Tori. What do you got from Tori?
Oh my God, Tori is longtime listener since the Forcecast days. Remember the Forcecast?
Yeah, that was a long time.
Was fortunate to meet you both at Celebration Orlando 2017. What a trip that show was. He said, I thought I'd have a crack at writing a song for RFR. References a number of the in-jokes from throughout the years. And apparently, this is Tori from Australia. Apparently, Tori was taking the pulse of members of the RFR Facebook group about what their favorite RFR in-jokes are. And he used all of those references to create the lyrics to this song, which he just presented to us. It's an epic. It's an epic. This is like Freebird. This is like Stairway to Heaven. This is huge. It's the RFR song by Tori from Australia. World premiere.
For many years we've tuned in. It started off so long ago. Not that for some kind of nerd thing. I'll see you at the next after show. From Coruscant to Chicago, under road to Ohio, your source for the Force. Let's go. Rebel Force Radio. Episode. Have you felt his felt? Because Puppet Lando is here. Only thing smoother might be Cerveza Crystal Beer. That's no moon, I can tell from just a glance. That can only be one thing, Bob Balloon ass. It's possible. From Coruscant to Chicago, under road to Ohio, your source for the Force. Let's go. Rebel Force Radio. Oh yeah, our fandom flame by both. They're my friends and yours. Friends in your ears, their passion is never slowed. You've gone late, not in this episode. Storytell had us spitting out a C-3PO cereal. Dr. Vinny was working on something bacterial. Yeah. Finding Ted in the Polynesian spa. It can't be long until we get another call from Bob Iger. So much for us to reminisce. Battle droids, we can do better than this. From Coruscant to Chicago, under road to Ohio, your source for the Force. Let's go. Rebel Force Radio. John as a hologram, everything is massive. Whereas kids turn now, wishing we're so passive. New shows from new stories, we're all along for the ride. Oh, Nat is on the phone, looks like you're about to be chastised. Hello? Nat. Good memories, but many more to come. Remember that time I interviewed some Rachel's Crumb. We'll be there each week for every new show. RFR, our friends in the Force, may they never go.
What an epic. Holy. Oh, a little.
Well, there you go. Wow. Tori, my
crazy.
goodness. That is certainly up there. That's a top fiver of all time, I think, as far as RFR tribute songs. That's amazing. Fantastic.
That is amazing. We didn't listen to that before the show either. I mean, that was the amount of references going on in the lyrics of that song, from Puff a Pig to Baboon Ass, all of the great moments of RFR
C-3PO
history.
cereal, that's a deep cut. Man.
Tim Morrison at the Polynesian Spa gets a shout out. Bob Iger phone calls. Good Lord, you all. That's amazing. Of course, Kitster gets his time to shine in the spotlight. Nat calls. We'll post up the lyrics to this and maybe make it a downloadable thing for you. We might put it on Patreon. We might put it on the official page. We'll let you know where it ends up. But wow, thank you so much, Tori from Australia.
Rebel Force Radio.
All right, let's catch up with the news.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news.
Come closer, I have good news.
All right, as Max said, the cast and crew of Ahsoka looking for some Emmy noms, maybe some gold they can bring home to Lucasfilm. And as part of that, they go on this PR tour, and one of these stops was the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast. We got Dave Filoni, Hayden Christensen, and Rosario Dawson here. It's quite a lineup.
Yeah, true. They all appeared to talk to Josh Horowitz. And I love the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast. Josh Horowitz, he knows his Star Wars, and it's always a great source to get. I think he catches a lot of actors off guard, because oftentimes when they sit in front of him, they're promoting something else. And Josh will float in a really sly question about a Star Wars project they're working on. And oftentimes he ends up with quality results. He's a great interviewer. One of my favorite entertainment reporters working today. So the trio of Hayden, Rosario, and Filoni stopped by to share some behind-the-scenes stories and maybe even a little news with Josh Horowitz. I'm really only focusing on Hayden and Filoni for these highlights. I love Rosario. She's amazing, but she didn't really drop too many major bombshells throughout this conversation, so I'm just focusing in on some of the more newsworthy or interesting tidbits that I could pick out of this interview. So I'm going to start with Hayden, good old Annie, Hayden Christensen. And I thought this was interesting because I don't ever recall anyone asking this of Hayden before. Try to describe some of the differences between George Lucas's directing style and that of Dave Filoni's, because of course Hayden is one of the very few actors who, maybe the only one, who has been directed by both guys, the master and the apprentice. So I was very interested to hear what Hayden had to say about what's different about George's style and Filoni's style.
The language of the direction is much different. But the commonality is there because, you know, Dave was a student of George Lucas, and all of his understanding comes from time spent with George, and of course from being a fan before that too. And you really get a sense of that, and for me that was what was so comforting, was that I really felt that he was wanting to honor sort of what George had created, and you know, obviously, you know, move it forward and make it his own, but really wanting to sort of keep sort of the themes in line with what George was trying to communicate. And but yeah, I mean, you know, how they direct, they're much different in how they approach their craft of directing.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't very
George
specific.
was never really
Hayden wasn't very specific there, but I think
he is Hayden.
He is Hayden, and also look. It's no secret that George was never an actor's director, and
that's it.
So, but everybody wants to be kind to George. He's 80 years old. No one wants to say, well, George, thank God you were lucky to get 3 words out of him when you finished a take. Nobody wants to say that. Hayden wants to be kind here. But he does talk about the commonalities in terms of the passion and storytelling and all of that.
I think that Dave directs in a less specific way than maybe George did. Like, Dave tries to bring out emotion maybe a little bit more. He tries to tap into certain elements of your personality maybe a little more than George did.
I could see that.
But it's hard to compare the two because Dave has had such limited directing experience. And still to this day, he hasn't directed a feature film. So it's really hard to measure,
Yeah. Maybe Hayden was being equally kind to Dave as much as he was George. Hadn't thought of that.
True. And it's been noted that Hayden struggled on the sets of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith because of a hands-off directorial style that George had.
And Hayden being very inexperienced too.
Yes, and very intimidated by the massive size and scope and scale of Star Wars. He never worked in anything so epic. And so maybe he held back a little bit too much during the prequel filming. That's what I think. I think Hayden could have really put an individual stamp, but he was really concerned with following the direction that George was providing, and George's direction was naturally limited.
Right.
Because George is naturally limited as a director.
Yeah.
Albeit one of the most celebrated directors of all time.
Sure.
It's really hard to evaluate George as a director because he despised every minute of it.
Yeah, I think
he didn't have the passion of Spielberg or Coppola or Scorsese, his contemporaries.
He's a filmmaker. He's not a director. I think there's a big difference. Some of them, I think some can straddle that line. I think that Spielberg in particular has movies where he's more of a filmmaker, and I think he has some movies where he's more of a director. But George, I don't feel like George could ever just be a gun for hire. I mean, was he ever just hired to take somebody else's script and make it? I don't think he ever was.
After American Graffiti, he was a hot commodity.
Right.
And he was being presented scripts, and he could have jumped on them and made some decent coin because he was still sort of rubbing nickels together back then.
Yeah.
Even though he did make some fat cash off of American Graffiti, he still wasn't the George Lucas we know of today. And he just listened to his gut and stayed independent. That was very important to him. And he had concepts and ideas and material that he was shaping. And he was more concerned with that than making a quick buck.
Yeah.
And for that, he deserves our respect.
He also had a front row seat at what Coppola was going through with Paramount making The Godfather. I think that was also
he did
a big because Coppola had a lot of problems with the studio.
Yeah.
They made a whole movie about it, a whole miniseries about the making of that film. So I think George was, I think he realized that his ticket was going to be his own projects. And so when you talk about, I agree with you. I think that he is a celebrated director because he's never been just a director. So you get the whole package. You get the filmmaker.
Right.
You get the guy that wrote the stories and created the universes and all of that. So,
and extremely well schooled on the history of cinema.
Oh my gosh.
And someone very steeped in all of that. And these are the intangibles that George Lucas has always brought to the director's seat. without being technically a great an actor's director, someone who could really work with actors and everything. He understood the big picture, and that might have diminished. He might have stretched himself a little bit too thin. So when it comes to directing, he doesn't have the abilities to do it because there's so many other things swirling around in his head.
I also think that the art of directing, which so much of it has to do with the relationship that you are able to forge with the crew, the actors, all of that. You're sort of the you're the leader, you're the team captain. And I don't think George likes being in that role. I don't think he likes being in a role where everybody's looking to him for leadership, for guidance, for the steady hand. I just don't think that's something that he relishes. But something that I just, I've seen that documentary, The Beginning, a million times. I feel like it's on the making of The Phantom Menace. But it happened to just pop on YouTube tonight, and I was watching it, and there was the moment where he's having the meeting with John Knoll, and he's doing the little thing with the highlighters, like this is CG, this is real, this is CG, and this is real. And something I hadn't picked up on is he's talking about the budget of the film. And he goes, well, we're gonna have to do this for this budget, and then we're gonna have to figure out how to do it for this film, 2 other films, and then all the other filmmakers are gonna want to do it for their films. We have to figure out how to do it for theirs. And it just became very clear to me the weight that he was putting on himself in the making of this movie. Not only did he have to solve problems for the movie he was making, he had to solve problems for the next 2 movies he was making, and he knew that what they were doing was going to be so profound that it was going to be in demand, and he was going to have to find a way to make it work for God knows how many movies after that.
Right.
Incredible.
Obviously.
Incredible.
With ILM being the top place for special effects back then, there weren't many other places around that were providing that sort of computer-generated imagery. So George is the best, he's the best. Right. He's the greatest filmmaker that ever lived. And it's such a profound visual mind that created all of this great stuff that we're reaping the benefits of that all these decades later. And Dave Filoni is there, and he's the guy who is telling the stories now in the wake of George Lucas. He's a former protege of George Lucas. But what happens to Dave when he hits a dead end? And is not really certain in which direction to go in. Is George Lucas still on his speed dial? Is George still accessible to Filoni when he has questions about Jedi and lightsabers and the Force and all of that? And he answers this question. Does he still ask? Does he still tap into the knowledge of the master, George Lucas? Here's what he had to say.
I'm very cautious. I've had a lot of mentoring from him, and I the answer is yes, I do every now and then, but it's got to be something really important for me to go and seek him out now. And yet, even when I do it, it feels very mythical to go before him and talk. And he's the most humble guy, but it was the greatest asset on Clone Wars. It was the greatest confidence to know that he was there, to know that no matter what we did, he was the backstop. And it had to be a little bit like maybe Anakin felt sometimes with Obi-Wan, like Obi-Wan's got my back. I know he's there. Right. And so when he's not there, it's, it's a bit more, you're flying free, flying down that trench, and you're figuring, am I going to hit that exhaust port? I don't always know, but we do our best. We do it. We don't try. We do our best.
Yeah, we do.
Do or do not.
We do our best. Dave he's not lost that. Dave was always making connections between his relationship with the actors that he's working with or George himself. He was always creating like allegories with characters in the Star Wars films. I really do think that's something that has served him very well, is that I think it's because Dave is always in his own Star Wars movie. He's always in his own hero's journey, you might say. So I think that keeps him very, very much into the universe.
Absolutely it does. And it's nice to know that he still calls George from time to time.
Right.
I assumed as much. But also George made it very clear that when he walked away from that consulting gig, he was done with Star Wars. He said after you break up with someone, you don't call them up and then say, hey, let's go out for a cup of coffee sometime. You know, it just doesn't happen. You have to
just ask Marcia.
Clean cut.
Ask Marcia.
Well, I mean, my God.
But I mean, no.
But I mean, that's...
George took it to such an extreme. Not only do you not call the ex, you completely write her out of your own history book. Incredible. I mean,
but that was it. That happened at a time when the history books were being written.
Well, true.
And he got very burned. I mean, he was very burned in that relationship. So I understand both sides of the coin. I really do. I really do. And what goes on, you know, in George Lucas's house. That's, you know, there's so many things going on. We don't know. We don't have a front row seat for all of that.
We don't. But there was more than just a marriage there. That was a business partnership. That was a business relationship, and you know, the foundation of Lucasfilm. But
you're right about that. My friend.
Do think
Very
that you're right that it speaks to the level of the importance that Dave would need to make that phone call, because I don't necessarily think George is looking for the opportunity to talk shop or Star Wars with anybody.
Right. What? He called again? Oh, God. Oh, they were so confident when they denied my sequel trilogy treatment. And now they're calling to ask for help? George, you know, and I would call George all the time because he's a writer of great dialogue, you know. I hate sand. Gets everywhere.
Right.
So I mean, he can really put the pen to paper and come up with some very inspired shit.
Script doctor.
But, whoa. Sorry, I'm just getting everyone primed. I'm setting the stage. F.J. DeSanto's coming up, so I just want to make sure the pumps are primed for F.J.'s unfiltered conversation that will be happening very shortly here on this show. Because he's F.J., you know.
Right.
All right, sorry about that.
F-bomb DeSanto.
But so like he wrote that kind of dialogue, and that dialogue sort of grew into a life of its own sometimes. And the question that Hayden Christensen answers here in this interview on Happy, Sad, Confused is he responds, did he actually realize the I hate sand line would become so well known and borderline iconic in the future, and also, you know, a punchline to some jokes and stuff? But I mean, did he have any indication that the line would live on and have a life of its own after he delivered it in Attack of the Clones? And here's what Hayden has to say.
I had no idea. No. And I always enjoyed that scene, and I appreciated sort of where the sentiment was coming from. And, it was sort of a powerful metaphor for, you know, his sort of the sort of uncomfortableness of his upbringing in a lot of ways. But yeah, people really took to that line.
If you're at the beach, does any jerk like me come over and be like, "Hey, dude, I thought you hate sand"? Yeah.
I've gotten that a couple times.
When you came to set, when you came to set to do the World Between Worlds, and he gets there and he's standing there in the Anakin Skywalker outfit, it looks amazing. And I walked up to him, I think you go to me. I think I remember this right. You go, "Sand." Really? Your whole set.
Maybe I'd offended you or something.
But just sand.
We're doing this again. Really?
He just covered the entire set in sand. And we got to run through it.
And then you get these elaborate sets and you got just sand on the floor.
Now that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Now see, you that exhibits a few things. Filoni shares a story. When they were shooting the episode 5 of AHSOKA with the World Between Worlds and the reunion of Anakin and young AHSOKA, it's on that planet and they're at battle. I think it's the planet Teth, and there's sand everywhere. I mean, that's all. There's very minimal set in those flashback shots.
Oh yeah,
but you see they're on a terrain of nothing but sand. So Hayden shows up at the set, He's ready to shoot this stuff. Dive back in Anakin. And they're putting him on a set of sand. And so he considers that to be a personal affront to him. Because primarily, I think, of the I hate sand line. Primarily.
It reminds me of when George stuck vampire fangs in the little Yoda maquette that Christopher Lee had to play opposite of when they were making Attack of the Clones. There's a great outtake of that. He's like, "Oh, George, really? Oh, George, please. Must you?"
Yes. Let's amplify the way your career has been pigeonholed. Right. For Christopher Lee, definitely Dracula fangs, and for Hayden Christensen, sand.
Forever
hilarious,
sand.
Hilarious. So it's borderline newsworthy.
Okay.
Because these are the first public comments I've heard Dave Filoni make about the upcoming film that he's attached to direct. And Josh confronts him on that. Doesn't hold back. Josh wants to know the status of the film. And that's why I love Josh Horowitz, because he knows that he's going into territory he's not supposed to go into right now. But damn it, he wants answers. And so do we as Star Wars fans. So Josh Horowitz, we salute you. And here's the result of his work. He asked Dave Filoni for an update on the Dave Filoni Star Wars movie that was announced like over a year ago.
Over a year ago, it was announced you have a live-action Star Wars movie coming. Where are we at? Is there a script? Give me some hope.
Very exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff. I
listen to Filoni
I work in very long threads, and so for me, telling a story, I always have to know, where is this going? What's the outcome of this is going to be? And fans that have followed my work know this about Clone Wars, when I started Clone Wars, I had a good idea of how it was going to end. It changed a bit as we went on, but it's still fairly relative to the things that happened. I, at the time, didn't know Darth Maul was going to be in it. That was a George curveball. But George, he's allowed to do that. So I knew how Rebels was going to end. Because I've been writing season 2 of Ahsoka, things have clicked, and I have a much better idea about where things are going to go. And I will say I have an opening I really like quite a bit. I'm very excited about it for that picture. And I'm excited about the potential of just doing it. But right now my focus is very clearly on season 2, as well as the rest of the galaxy and how it's spinning. But I am excited. It's funny because every now and then there'll be something I get where someone says what my movie's about online. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I should read that and see if there's any good idea in there. That was early on, but I never do. I actually I'm very good at staying away from a lot of that stuff. And, but I love that the fans imagine. I love that they're excited about it. I'm excited about it, but one foot in front of the other right now, though. I think it's, for me, it's going well. It's at its normal development point in the way I make these stories happen. And, so we'll see. It's been fun to really dive into, and working with John on his movie, and that's exciting. And all the other things that we're developing. It's different. It's different for me now than it was before, because now I'm involved in everything.
Yeah, you're a suit. Yeah. No, but hey, listen, Filoni is a solid creative, but he is involved in everything. And he does sit at the executive level of Lucasfilm. And so he's got a lot of things flying in front of him. He does say he's developing the Ahsoka 2, the season 2 script right now. And I think the direction in which he pushes that story will determine the direction of his feature film. And his film is supposed to be that culmination event of the Filoni-verse / Favreau-verse. But John also has his own film happening, and it's coming out in a couple of years, Mandalorian and Grogu. So
December 2026, right?
and we'll be there.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to that one because I think Jon Favreau is a quality storyteller and technically speaking, someone who really knows about the mechanics of big budget, special effects laden filmmaking. He's been on the forefront of developing that technology, much like George Lucas was through all of his career. And, it's between the Favreau and Filoni. They really do pick up the baton that George Lucas set down once he retired. Favreau understands the technological edge, and he's also has a profound connection with Star Wars storytelling. And Dave Filoni is a protege of George Lucas's and understands the mechanics of Star Wars storytelling as well. So between the two of those guys, we're sitting very pretty as Star Wars fans, I think. And I'm so excited about the Mandalorian movie. I'm very excited about Dave Filoni's movie. And I think that a lot of my hangups about the Ahsoka story as it unfolded in season 1, hopefully, fingers crossed, those anxieties will be put to rest via season 2. And I think Dave Filoni's experience will then increase his ability to tell more fleshed out stories. So, he's not a guy who sticks his head in the sand. He says in the interview, he does a good job of ducking and weaving from online discussions about his projects. But we also know there was a time when he was very connected to our discussions about his projects. And so I think, a combination of the knowledge of what fans want and also his developing skills as a filmmaker and storyteller will eventually emerge into a quality experience with Ahsoka season 2. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
So it's great to hear from Dave. Great to hear from Hayden. And I hope the academies consider Ahsoka, because they're really busting their hump to try to get some acknowledgement for this series.
Yeah.
This is all about, for your consideration. And we'll have more highlights next week on RFR from other moments throughout this publicity tour they're doing to try to earn some bling for the Ahsoka series. So more to come next week.
Hey there, this is Ashley Eckstein, and this is Rebel Force Radio, your source for the Force.
All right, so from Dave Filoni to F.J. DeSanto, let's not leave him waiting.
Star Wars Cantina.
Where are you going, Master? For a drink.
Sorry about the mess. You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
All right, as we promised, we've got him here joining us, F.J. DeSanto. We love to get FJ's take whenever there's a new Star Wars television or any new Star Wars anything coming out, but particularly it's a treat when there's a new Star Wars television series to get his take. And FJ, we like to have you on after we've had a little bit of a taste, a couple or 3 episodes, and then you come on and you tell us where you think things are going, where they're getting it right, where they're getting it wrong. And with the Acolyte in particular, I would say that I haven't seen fandom this torn, this red hot in a long time, probably since in between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. I think that's the last time we've seen fans really this divided on something. So I know you were there. You saw the Acolyte premiere, same as Jimmy Mack saw it, the one that was in the theaters. When you left that theater, did you think that this show was going to continue to get the ire that it seems to be getting?
No, I walked out of it really liking it. But so I went to they call it a fan event, but it's really the premiere. They just don't want to spend the money on the premiere, right? Like, so, and I've been lucky to go to the last, how many they've done. I went to Mandalorian. I went to Ahsoka. I think I did 2 of the 3 Mandalorian seasons. I think whichever one was COVID, didn't happen. So I've been very lucky in getting to go to these things. Very fortunate that I get invited to them. And, I walked out of it sort of going, hey, and obviously everybody knows we have a giant text chain that never ends privately. And that, that I was like, oh, it's a murder mystery. It's Shaw Brothers movie. It's all this fun stuff. And I really liked it and want to see where it goes. And I tweeted to that effect. And I just feel like they sort of skirted by the first 2 episodes, but this third one, obviously, just set everybody on fire. And look, you guys know me. I've been on this show how many times?
Countless
times. I just can't get
easily since the 60s.
Even if something is subpar, you just move on to the next thing. And I don't think this is subpar.
Yeah.
I think, look, am I saying it's perfect? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But what I found refreshing about it was a clear, and this is what we've been fighting with Kyle all day. And I don't know what he did on the show. I didn't listen intentionally because then I'd just do like the Kyle rebuttal for 2 hours.
Well, no, Kyle wasn't on. He wasn't on the show.
I thought he was on.
No.
We just did the after show this week.
Shit. He's gonna attack me.
Well, I mean, he shouldn't do that. I mean, you are his therapist after all. At least that's the role that you've been playing lately.
He's losing his goddamn mind. And let me start and sort of say why I think this is hated, and then actually do what very few people are actually doing, which is actually talk about the show.
Right.
And what it is and what it isn't. So I'm of the belief, and again, let's keep in context. I'm a middle-aged dude who lives in a major city. I've lived in cities all my life. I don't know the world. I don't pretend to know.
Okay.
And what I think this is a couple of things. I think it's an easy target because of the filmmakers. And I think it carries on a semi-true, semi-false narrative about Lucasfilm and their mandates. I think some of it's very, very overblown, and I think some of it's justified. But I also think it's a sort of perfect storm of all that stuff, but also a certain degree of erosion of goodwill with the core fan base in particular.
Yes.
And what the fan base isn't doing is expanding. And it's not finding a way to connect with younger viewers, etc. Like that's the one big thing I'm seeing is, kids like Kyle's kids' age and stuff like that are just sort of checked out of Star Wars. And there is a sort of social media narrative that, hey, Star Wars sucks now. And that's that. And, hey, it's this woman directing this thing and it's got an agenda and it's got all these things. And while I don't necessarily disagree with how it's presented, when you actually watch the show, I don't really see that entirely in the show. I feel like the majority of the people I argue with over the show are like, and in particular, I hate to call out Kyle, but like literally he's pointing out things. It's like, well, that shit's in the show. He's like, there's no myth. It's like, they're witches. There's Jedi. Like, there's myth. Like, it's a different sect of the Force. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, there's no hope to it. It's like the whole main character, Saul, is about having hope for this girl, right? And helping her and saving her in the first 2 episodes. Again, the problem with recent Star Wars, in particular, goes back to something I've said many, many times on this show, which is always about the execution. I always feel like the intention's right. I feel like the ideas are good, and the execution doesn't always land. I actually think, from a storytelling point of view, and Kyle is literally going to show up at my door for this, I actually think this is better storytelling than Ahsoka and Book of Boba Fett and most of Mando season 3. In terms of, let me explain. I think it has the benefit of not having the baggage of the Skywalkers and, you know, the past and, you know, because all the other ones do. You got a friggin' Baby Yoda. Like, you're making these connections. It's the Empire. You're making those connections. It's a guy in a Boba Fett outfit who's not Boba Fett. You make those connections. Ahsoka has the baggage of the other shows. Boba Fett has the Boba Fett baggage. You know, and again, obviously, as we all know, Andor exists on its own planet. You know, it hovers above everything, like Rogue One does in Andor. It's the pinnacle of modern Star Wars filmmaking, and the one time somebody's gotten it completely right from top to bottom. And so with this show, I think my enjoyment of it is its simplicity. Now, by the way, I'm not unaware of, you know, the sort of social media onslaught on it. And that's certainly not to say it doesn't impact my, you know, sort of response to that, in that I sort of walked out of it going, oh, it didn't suck. You know, it wasn't great, but it didn't suck. Like, hey, this is an intriguing story. And these are new characters. And, you know, and I think about when I was 7, 8 years old and, you know, you'd buy a toy of a random character in the back of the friggin' cantina and they finally had a name. Right? Yeah. Like, shit, who is that? Like, what's your story? Like, so that to me is like, when the show opens and it's Carrie Ann Moss, it's like, what are you about? You know what I mean? What's Saul about? What's this character about? Like I still try to tap into that childhood. Like, I love the visual dictionaries, right? That they do.
Oh yeah.
Like to the point where it's like, oh, it's the, you know, like the fabric of this tunic is made of whatever the hell, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I love that stuff. Right? Yeah,
I love that stuff. Like those literally, between the art of books and the visual guides, only stuff I buy, you know, from a book point of view. And, you know, I don't know, like, I haven't read the High Republic. That's another thing everybody knows. I never read the books. I wait for you guys or Kyle or somebody to tell me, like, you need to know this shit. And I go, okay, great, you need to know this shit. So I'm judging it purely on the show. And I thought, in particular, by the time the second episode ended, that, hey, you know, like, hey, this is an intriguing setup. Now, could the mystery have been stronger? Sure. Could the execution? I like the fights, but I'm a kung fu movie guy. Everybody knows that. So, like, you're speaking to me with this, right? Like, you know, I'm married to a Korean, and my mother-in-law knows who that guy is. You know what I mean? Oh, my God, it's this guy. He's an American show. And, you know, so it's like, I'm sitting there going, to me, the problem with Star Wars in particular is the weight of expectation. We've talked about this before. There's always a weight of expectation because of the history. And, you know, Star Wars itself is this monument to filmmaking and franchises, and is literally one of the few things that you could say is a global defining thing. There's very few things you can compare. Matrix doesn't do that, right? No. It's influential, but it's not a world changing thing. And the Star Trek, I love Star Trek. You guys know that. Not a world changing thing. Great impact on the world, you know, great influence on the world, great fan base, but didn't change filmmaking, didn't change franchises, didn't change effects, didn't change storytelling, blah, blah. And so the problem is, you know, can you imagine, by the way, social media when the prequels came out? If you had that shit, forget it. Lucas would have put out Phantom Menace and gone home.
George would have been canceled after the Moidian said his first line,
or Jar Jar Binks,
or Jar Jar Binks, or some of that. FJ, I want to go back to something that you said because I thought it was really interesting. You talked
I've been
about
thinking a lot about this all day. So
this being, you know, we can thank Kyle for this too. This is great because he spurs the conversation. Let's talk about what you said about the erosion of trust and not expanding the fan base, because there is a narrative, and I'll say that I fall into it, where I feel as though that this is the result of them trying to expand the fan base. I'll give you some examples. Recently, and I can find the article, but recently there were some statistics that talked about how Star Wars was and continues to be overwhelmingly a male-dominated brand. Okay? Yeah. And so the narrative is that is either inconvenient for Lucasfilm, that is embarrassing to Lucasfilm, and therefore they're doing everything they can to attract more female viewers, more marginalized peoples, things like this, that on its surface, you say, well, that's not bad. We want everybody to love Star Wars. I grew up in a family of all female cousins back in the 80s, and they loved Star Wars just as much as I did. They saw the same movies I saw. So on its face, that's not a bad thing. We want everybody to love this. But the narrative is that they are purposely changing the way they tell the story and what stories they tell to build a new fan base. But what you said earlier was that this franchise is not expanding the fan base. So is it backfiring on them, or is that just sort of a straw man, that's not really what's happening?
No, I agree with a lot of it. You know, my big argument with you is I don't think they're embarrassed by anything. I think they're just overthinking everything. And yes, absolutely, there's a mandate. Expand the audience. Expand it to blah, blah, blah.
I mean, that's business.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, look, that is business. Look, that's clearly a corporate mandate. Okay? So as much as everybody wants to blame Kathy Kennedy and blah, 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 you know, who obviously is not blameless, as, you know, she's the head of the company, is right. With this show in particular, well, I know the first episode followed a dude Jedi around who had another dude with no shirt on and, you know, and his Padawan. Like, maybe that's me, you know, like I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, as long as it's good, I don't give a shit who it is, right?
Yeah.
And but to your point, yes, they're sitting there going, I don't think they're changing the storytelling. Okay. That, like, I don't think they're sitting there going, change this to this. I think they're developing things with the idea of what you're talking about, which is make it as, you know, broad and accessible to everybody. And subsequently, in many ways, they do miss the mark. Okay. In terms of, but again, it's one of those things, like, this is what people don't friggin' get. It's like, and again, there's another thing I said before they were even doing the TV shows. There's an audience growing up with this that you and I, you know, three of us as old men cannot understand, that, you know, this may speak to a young girl, or this may speak to a Korean kid seeing famous actor in a Star Wars show. And you don't know what that's going to be 5, 10, 15 years from now. And now, even though I said this for many years and sounded like a dipshit, it's been proven with what we call prequel nostalgia last year with Obi-Wan.
Yeah. Right.
You know,
I get this argument where people are always saying, well, you know, the original trilogy was so impactful on a generation. The prequel trilogy was so impactful on a generation. And the fandom and passion among those fans developed then in the years following the release as these fans grew into adulthood.
Right.
And then they say, well, that's going to happen with the sequel trilogy too. And I push back on that a little bit because entertainment is so segmented now. We don't have universal entertainment like we did in the original trilogy era or we did in the prequel era. There are just too many different places to find entertainment, and it's become so segmented that to build a big hit now is really, really hard. Because everyone has their own specific places where they find entertainment. It's not like the old days when we had 3 TV channels and a couple of UHF channels and everybody went to the movie theaters every weekend. Those days are over. So I don't know if the mojo exists to make the sequel trilogy as much of a cultural monument to Star Wars like the OT and the prequel trilogy, just because of the way that content consumption has evolved.
You're totally right. However, the one thing I'm going to push back on is a couple of things. In terms of the business and consumption, 99% of everything you said, I fully agree with. Sorry, the light went out in the office.
The lights are going
I think, no, I know I'm causing all kinds of trouble. Here's where I disagree. I think we can't answer that question because Force Awakens, Rey, Finn, Poe, in particular Kylo Ren, just skew the edge of before the streaming age when people still went to movies.
Yeah, it still was the biggest domestic box office hit of all time.
Point, when we were kids, you wouldn't have Star Wars TV, right? There's somebody who made a documentary when they tried to do that. And so, you know, to your point, cultural changes, absolutely. We can't predict 5, 10 years from now. However, I can guarantee you that in 2050, Daisy Ridley's going to walk into Star Wars Celebration and they're going to go batshit crazy when they're doing some movie that reunites them, you know, with the next generation of kids. Someone's going to do it. It's never going to go away.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And we're in a lull. It'll come back, you know, all that shit. So, I mean, again, I can't argue with anything. We won't know the consumption methods that it's like, look, I'll give you an example. You know, I do a lot of work in the comic book industry, right? In the comic book industry for the last 20 years in particular has lost an entire young audience to video games and manga and anime in particular. Now, you know, and, you know, in my world, you have to sort of pivot in that regard. That's why I produce anime, or that's why, I mean, I always loved that stuff to begin with, so it was a little easy. But subsequently, another thing we don't have sort of, the problem with this day and age we live in is everybody's got short memories, right? And 3 years ago, especially COVID shit, is Baby Yoda was a cultural thing.
True.
Right. That was more of a cultural, Mandalorian was more of a cultural impact than the sequel trilogy. And
agreed.
I have friends my age who have little kids who are starting their kid who have discovered Star Wars through The Mandalorian. So when Luke Skywalker shows up in The Mandalorian, they're like, oh, that guy must be important. Well, guess what? There's a bunch of movies about where this guy came from. And you can't sort of downplay that. Now, it's never going to be what it was. And that's the other big problem is, you know, we're the first generation of Star Wars, right? We're the first, you know, I'm old enough briefly to remember a world there was no Star Wars. So you can remember briefly for, you know, it's like 3 or 4. But the point being is you can remember how that world changed. You can remember that moment, for me in particular, when Han Solo showed up on screen for the first time and you were a completely different person when you walked out of the movie. That's a 1 in a billion thing. It's not going to happen ever again. You know what I mean? Like, and the smartest thing Lucas ever did was not touch that stuff for 15 years, right? And do the prequels. And everybody hated the prequels. And I guarantee you he would have literally stopped after Phantom Menace and never come back and tell everybody to go F themselves. And
if social media was around, you mean specific.
But again, I've got my nephew who's 25 years old. He doesn't look at Jar Jar Binks the way we do. You know, to him, you know, I've said this before, Amidala is no different than Leia to him because it's all part of that bigger story. Forget the quality of the movies. Because guess what? And this was sort of, and I was talking to you guys about this on the chat the other day, is, you know, I went to go see Phantom Menace. Was it, you know, like a week ago? Or like a month ago. Sorry, a month ago. Yeah. And they showed it on the screen. And I went with Kyle. I put the picture on the Facebook group. And
wait, you went with Kyle to see the Phantom Menace? You went with Kyle?
No. This past month, yeah, we went together.
No kidding.
And
no kidding.
Do you not pay attention to your own Facebook group? I put it on there. And
hey, you know, I mean, I'm too busy busting heads over there. Well, that too, yeah. That little thing gets in the way sometimes.
The last time I had seen Phantom Menace on the big screen was the 3D version. Kyle and I went to the Fox lot to see an advanced screening of it.
2012.
And yeah. And he and I did that. But I distinctly remember, so great, someone found the goddamn picture. And so what was interesting was I have a distinct memory of 10 minutes into Phantom Menace and went, uh-oh. Like, I don't know. Yeah, like I remember, like it was like when the Deca droids come out or the Roger shit happens, and I'm like, that's corny. And
yeah,
you know, and I sort of, but then I remember the only time I got goosebumps, and it happened again a month ago, was when Obi-Wan bursts free and attacks Darth Maul. Like that Star Wars, like the hair, the back of the neck, and all that shit stands up, right? But
yeah,
and I remember a lot of people, you know, sort of poo-pooing the movie and not liking it and all that shit. And as this group knows, you know, we've been prequel apologists for a number of years. But for me,
so true.
For me, I love this world so much that anything more I can learn about it, I'm okay with, right?
Yes.
Now it sounds like I'm lowering my standards or whatever, but like,
you know,
I refuse to put which is what Kyle does. He puts his director hat on. He puts his writer hat on. I refuse to put my producer hat on or my writer hat on. There are times where I sit there. That's interesting. It's like, hey, if you did Last Jedi, you could have done it this way, or you know, you could have done this and write the dialogue like that and all that shit. But I'm not going to get angry at it, right? Like I just, you know, I say this every time. I don't get angry. So like, okay, I don't know anything about the Jedi 100 years before Phantom Menace, and guess what? They're kind of dicks, and you know, they're going around planets looking for kids. Which, when you're in Phantom Menace and it's Qui-Gon, it's like, hey, you're actually saving this kid. And these Jedi the other night are sitting there plucking these kids from their mom, right? Like, that's interesting to me. Like, the arrogance of the Jedi. You got to remember, like, you watch the sequel, the prequel trilogy, the Jedi are stupid. The Jedi are suckers. Palpatine plays them 3 movies.
Yes.
Plays them.
By the time Mace Windu says something along the lines of, I believe there is something going on here to destroy the Jedi. I think he says it about midway through Revenge of the Sith. And you just want to yell at the screen. Finally!
You just figured this shit out, right? So it's like, the point being is, I take that kernel, work it backwards to this, where these Jedi who are showing up to, 16 years before to take these kids are arrogant, and Saul is naive.
Yeah.
At that point, Saul, when you really look at it, Saul in the 3rd episode is very different than the present day Saul in the first 2 episodes, right? He's very jaded, he's very deep and blah, blah. And this one, he's very sweet. And, he almost reminds me of Obi-Wan in the Phantom Menace. He's idealistic, et cetera. Like, I can help you become a Jedi and blah, blah, blah. They rescued me too. And it's like, who that guy is in that scene with the little kid is very different than the guy we see in the first 2 episodes. And I thought that was really interesting. But it's like, clearly, and again, no one's, all this shit on your Facebook page, very few people actually talking about the show, right? Like,
well, I know that, and that's very frustrating.
What do you say? Like,
and it depresses Jason. Jason gets depressed because of that.
For me, it's Jason, like I go on there.
He needs, You're going to be more than just Kyle Newman's therapist. I think you're going to have to take on another client.
Well, that's
Jason.
The thing.
Every time he looks at the Facebook page.
That's the thing that has really driven me crazy is that I'll sit here and we can talk about the merits of the show, the quality of the show. We did it for 2 hours this week on the RFR after show. What I'm less interested in No, is everybody carrying in, their personal politics and all of this? I actually heard a commentator talking about the witches being in Star Wars and how, this was this radical new take, this new thing in Star Wars. And, they're trying to insert satanic BS and all this into Star Wars. And I thought, well, that's insane. The witches... Right, witches have been in Star Wars since the second Ewok film, for one, and their role was expanded throughout the Clone Wars, and into Ahsoka. So there's a lot of people. This is bandwagoning. There's a lot of people that are opportunists, and there is, obviously there's a culture war that's going on. And then there's this bandwagoning where they go, okay, so Star Wars is the target right now. I'm going to jump on this. And sometimes these people have my sympathies. And when it comes to Star Wars, though, they absolutely don't. I think that they're showing, first of all, how ignorant they are. Star Wars has nearly 50 years of lore, mythology, for these people to jump in and add their social commentary because they watched 10 minutes of a Disney Plus TV show. They got to check themselves. They really do. And I think some of that attitude is what's spilling on to our Facebook group. And it drives me crazy.
It's a goddamn flood. And it's not limited to your Facebook. I mean,
no, it's everywhere.
In a really long time, random people are texting me wanting to debate this show. And the second I engage with one or two people, it's good. You didn't watch the show. You watched some recap video.
Right.
Or you saw something on Twitter. I'll give you the example. I'll give you two examples, right? Like, the perfect example is I'll give you two. One from the third episode, one from the second episode, right? The third episode is the whole, conception of the children thing, right? And she goes, well, I carried them. And the other one says, I created them, right? That's insane, right? Like, that's dark Force shit. And then, she makes that other Jedi's eyes go black and takes over. Like, she got some crazy shit going on. Now, you can argue the execution isn't powerful enough, but like, I had 3 people all go, that diminishes Anakin's birth. No.
Yes, that's a common thing going around.
Right.
Unless we find out otherwise, Anakin's the Immaculate Conception. This is a forced conception, right? Or I shouldn't say forced, intentional conception. Right?
Manufactured conception.
Midi-chlorians, right? You forget, the Turbin takes her midi-chlorian count. We don't know what happens with that yet.
Ooh.
Right? Like,
that's a good point,
and that's the other problem is people aren't actually fucking paying attention to the show, right?
Right.
So you're sitting there going, why do you take her midi-chlorians, right? If it doesn't pay off, then it's the fault of the director, right? But the other thing is, like, you had that scene, and this is the bit about the second episode, is she goes to that temple, right? Which I think is super cool to see Jedi temples and, the Jedi.
Yeah, always. Right.
And this dude's been floating for 12 years. And everybody's more concerned about his receding hairline than they are the fact that basically
and the fake beard,
He cops to the fact that they screwed these kids over in some way, shape, or form. Again, argue the execution. I don't care.
Well, I mean, nobody's going to take their own life as a result of feeling the guilt of something they did if it wasn't something extremely significant. And that part of the story is yet to be told.
It says, I've been waiting for you. That's crazy.
That's very interesting to dig deep into that
that's the whole point.
particular
We've been on
comment.
this for a half hour. This is the first time we talked about the goddamn show.
Well, we were crafting the interview, FJ, a bit. So we
there's a lot of things swirling around this show, and we did do a complete breakdown of that third episode, and yes, we made the conscious effort to stick to the lore that's being presented in the show. And I think we did a really damn good job of sticking to the landing as far as that went. some people are saying things like, well, thanks for doing such a positive review. And it's like, well, it's not like we're giving it a positive or a negative review. We're just breaking down and analyzing the lore that's being presented in the show. And almost
you guys are doing it with no agenda, no bullshit with it. It's like, here's the show.
Right.
And that's what people, I think most normal people want, is what you guys are doing.
I think
right?
so. I don't think there's so many outlets for people who want to complain and do nothing but complain about it. Let them have their outlet. I don't think that particularly makes compelling podcasting. And I'll admit something right here, right now on this microphone. I was extremely and harshly critical of the way the story rolled out for the Ahsoka series. And at the end of all of that, the experience to me was not satisfying or fulfilling because I hyper focused on that one particular part, because the lore is the most important thing to me. And I had difficulty analyzing the Ahsoka show and the lore that was being presented because I thought it was some shoddy writings. I just thought the way they executed the story it left too many questions, and it was too gimmicky the way it was all happening. I prefer to have a character who I can see the show through their eyes, and they aren't hiding anything from me. They are on a quest for discovery. And I never made that connection with Ahsoka because it felt like the whole show, she was hiding something. And so then I look at the antagonists and I don't know what their motivation is because they're hiding something. And so it just got very frustrating at the end of the day when I tried to analyze that show. And when I look back at it, I'm like, man, I should have just taken a more neutral approach when I was breaking it all down, because at the end of the day, I wasn't having fun. I want to have fun with Star Wars. And I think the best way for me to have fun with Star Wars and almost find my own zen as a fan is to focus purely on the lore and the action figures. My wallet doesn't like the fact that I focus so much on the action figures. My bank account hates me for that fact, but hey, there has to be a price to pay.
Your commentary is all based on execution, the show itself. So obviously, right. And I don't necessarily disagree with you either. To me, and I said this, I don't know if I said this publicly, but Ahsoka to me is 4 episodes squashed over 8. Was stretched over 8, I should say. Like
for sure, it's maybe 3 episodes
and all that shit. And I didn't dislike it, but so to go back to this show, Acolyte, I think that was the refreshing thing was when I finished those first 2 episodes in the theater, which by the way always helps when you have an audience and
yes, there's an energy
literally the actors
feed off
sitting a row over, so excited to see themselves. I sat there and went, okay, I know what's going on. It's clean. It's simple. I know what the motivations are. I know what they need to do, etc. And by the way, the one thing, again, I don't know if we were talking about this off air, which is about the marketing and the interviews and all that shit. What people seem to be skipping over with this 3rd episode is they've been very clear this is a Rashomon style show. So I actually think things that people think are gaps in this 3rd episode are going to be filled out from different POVs as we go. I don't want to name names, but someone involved with the show told me that when the show's over, the 3rd episode will feel more poignant.
Well, I want to go back to what you were saying about the Anakin Skywalker Immaculate Conception and all of that, because we were banding about some theories on the after show, and we had a caller that for me really helped sort of reorient myself with the story, in the sense that I was really preoccupied with the witches and the Jedi, and I wasn't thinking about the specter of the Sith that's in the back of all of this. And I don't know that the show was doing a great job keeping that going, but I do think it's there. And in this sense, I sort of am coming around to this idea that perhaps the witches, or at least Anastasia, is being manipulated and used by a Sith that's going to sort of, she thinks that she's getting what she wants, which is helping to repopulate her coven, starting with these twins. She calls them a miracle. She uses the term unnatural, which is exactly the same term that Palpatine used when he was talking about creating life in the Opera House in Episode 3. I disagree with you. I do think that what we are seeing here is the prototype, as it were, for the conception of Anakin Skywalker. However, it's a lesser than conception because it's not an all individually powerful light side, dark side, balanced character. It's split in two for some reason. Now, again, this is all theory. So I do think that they are related because we already have sort of prior art for this idea of a fatherless conception. So the argument is that, well, this takes away from Anakin Skywalker. One, you have Rey in Episode 9. She ends up being the one to rid the galaxy of Palpatine once and for all. So Anakin is no longer the chosen one who brought about the end of the Sith. And now his Immaculate Conception isn't even special because we've got this May and this AHSOKA. So there's a thought that they're deconstructing and sort of taking away what was special about Anakin Skywalker.
I get the logic. I get the theory. I can't argue it. Until someone says one or the other, right? Like you can't sit there and go, like, yeah, I'm basing my theory that you're debating simply based on what's on screen. So what I don't understand, you could sit there and go, okay, these witches have Sith powers, and this is what, or Force powers, and this is what you were talking about. They need to repopulate the coven. They've been exiled. All that shit. Okay. So it makes sense. Like, hey, I met Darth Plagueis in a bar and he taught me how to do this or whatever, right? And while I totally think it can connect in some tangential way to Palpatine and Darth Plagueis the Wise and that whole Revenge of the Sith theory, why would you go to Tatooine and knock up some random slave woman, right? When you go find somebody who had Force powers and well, that's what I was talking about. Like this one being an intentional concept. Now there could be a whole thing where like, here's the dumb version. Like, and I think they hint at it like in the comics, which is stupid. It's like Palpatine goes, I'm going to use the Force and conceive a baby somewhere, and it happens, right? Like and all that, and it's lame and whatever. The Immaculate Conception idea is much better just on its own. And again, the reason I can't debate what you're saying, other than all I can do is expand on it, was the fact that we haven't seen it yet. If we go through the show and you find out this is how Anakin was made and someone did it intentionally, it's like, well, yeah, that does diminish the thing. I'm not going to argue that, unless they have some cool twist we don't know about, right? And
well, for me, that's like, but I don't necessarily agree that it takes everything away from Anakin. I'm maybe a little bit more put out by Rey being the one that destroys Palpatine, because it'd be like saying that General Grievous takes away from Darth Vader because he was sort of a prototype machine man sort of thing. I do think that Anakin Skywalker ends up being sort of the highest ideal of the Force. So I think there's always going to be something special about him, no matter what other things that the Sith or the witches conjure. So I'm not letting that completely ruin Anakin Skywalker for me. They're gonna have to work harder than that. But I do think that that's a good example of people grabbing onto this stuff and saying, oh, they're trying to subvert, they're trying to tear down the heroes that I grew up with and replace them with these new modern lesser than versions.
And it was never actually explicitly stated that Anakin Skywalker was the only example of a dark side user manipulating the Force to create life. It was never said it was exclusively Anakin. That was never stated in any of the storytelling.
Right.
So
Look,
I think if one Sith can do it, others can.
People forget that in The Mandalorian, they found a bunch of Snoke clones. No one talks about that. Right? Like
Snokes.
There are ways I think they're going to connect dots and things like that. It just, to me, it's like this show has an advantage of being, a century before. So you can maybe pluck some of these things in and out and, go, well, this is how Force births are done, all that shit. And like something goes wrong and it leads to the Immaculate Conception or some shit. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Again, it's hard not, but like that didn't bother me. Like people were like literally messaging me like they ruined Anakin. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because
I don't see it.
Intentional conception versus immaculate conception, totally different things with the Force. And as far as we know, it's the first time we've seen this, right? So you can't sit there and go, we literally, and the irony is this moment in the show is very similar in terms of download and knowledge that we got in New Hope. We have no reference for this beforehand. We don't know what this means, etc. The only thing is we know there's this guy Anakin 100 years later is going to be the chosen one. These kids are not the chosen ones, right? Like they're not.
But, we do come in with our predetermined notions of what the Force is. We come in there with our predetermined notions of what a dark side user and what a Jedi is and their relationship to the Republic or whatever. Now, that's the one part, the Jedi relationship to the Republic is the one factor in there that I see you can have a lot of flexibility with. But as an audience, it's so much different than going into A New Hope and not knowing anything about Star Wars and having the story presented to you. Yes, this is the earliest live action there is on the timeline, but that doesn't mean that us as an audience is going to come in there and abandon all knowledge we have developed over 45 plus years about what things like Jedi and the Force actually is. So I think that's kind of an uphill climb for the creators, especially if they're trying to present something new into the Star Wars saga.
We talked about.
Yeah.
Let me, sort of to follow up on what you're saying, because I agree with you, is when you take a step back and you look at the sequels, they did crazy shit with the Force, right? She's healing. Luke is floating and sending Force projections. She saved Kylo Ren from the dead, and then he returns the favor, right? Like, and they have their Force time where they're talking to each other and the water's pouring on him and all that stuff, and they reach that point. Like, they added a lot of new Force shit into that. And the tricky part is, to your point, which is now, well, here's just a hypothetical question for all of us nerds, which is, were the Jedi able to do those things? And those are things Rey learned in the books, and it's shit Luke learned later. And Kylo found out he could stop a laser beam. And did they discover those things themselves? Are they the pioneers in that? Or was that shit the Jedi did 100 years before? Because you got to remember, Luke knows Obi-Wan for about 24 hours, trains with Yoda for about 48 hours. He's got all the sacred texts. He's got time to read all that, enough to start his own group and all that stuff. And Rey inherits those books. In between second and third movie, has Rey studied that stuff? And that was stuff these Jedi that we're meeting in Acolyte can do. That's interesting or not. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm just saying that's something I sort of posit to everybody. Sort of like, that could be really interesting. Like, could Saul, because, I mean, look, when you look at this, like they even fight differently in this, right? Like where it's like, hey, there's barely, in those first two episodes, it's barely a lightsaber. It's all kung fu. And again, I love that shit. And it's all Force kung fu. And, the Jedi in this show are not the Jedi in the prequels, and they're not Luke, and they're not Rey. And you got to understand, Luke and Rey have the disadvantage of no one teaching them. Well, she's got Leia, but really, what did Leia do? Leia was trained for what? A couple of years, and then she has a baby, and that's it, right? So, again, I'm just sort of going through the canon and all the shit with that. But, there's a cool bit in the second episode where Osha falls and Saul brings her back and says, I believe you. And she's hanging off the thing. And it's like, oh, that's the cool Force stuff. But even the opening fight scene, like, you got Carrie-Anne Moss, hopping upstairs like a kung fu movie, on wires and stuff like that. It's like, well, that's kind of the shit we imagine the Jedi doing, right? And another thing, because no one pays attention to actually any of the media associated with the show, is, and someone could correct me if I interpreted this wrong, is the Acolyte is actually the start of the descent of the Jedi that culminates in the prequel trilogy.
Well, right? Yeah, that's, I think, what we'd like to believe.
Them at their pinnacle, and whatever happens here starts that very slow 100-year descent, right? That leads to Palpatine and all that shit. So you got to look at it from those lenses too. Like, they're in the height of arrogance. Like, when they show up on that planet, they're arrogant. You know what I mean? Like, what's his name? The receding hairline is sort of like nice. And Saul is, very naive and all this stuff. And the Wookiee we don't know anything about yet. But Carrie-Anne Moss shows up like a cop. It's like a cop raiding, I hate, we're going to deport you. This is child services. But
she was very heavy-handed. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some real, this is another thing that Kyle pissed me off on earlier today, which was, he was like, New Hope reflected the values of the 70s and the world of the 70s. To me, that scene reflects today with immigration issues and blah, 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 all that stuff. It's like, that's very serious stuff, in the guise of Star Wars. And, I find that very, very interesting. I find it very dramatic. And by the way, I still want one show where the Jedi are just super heroic swashbucklers and it's fun and blah, blah. And I'm hoping someone figures out how to do the Ewan, they need to do a show that's Hayden, Ewan, and the little kid who plays Ahsoka. Like, in the height of, one adventure where, Anakin's not bad yet. He's cool. And they just do cool stuff and they're friends.
It's a no-brainer.
Have a good time.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, that has been one of my frustrations, FJ, is that I look around and I go, where are the heroes? Because in the original trilogy, it was very clear. Yes, Han Solo was, he was a little rough around the edges, but he had a pure heart and he ended up saving the galaxy or playing a major part in that. Luke Skywalker is, sort of the prototypical hero. Leia as well. But I look here and I look around and the Jedi are flawed. The New Republic is flawed when you see them in the Mando verse. Everybody's flawed. Everybody is sort of gray. And I think that for me, there's nuance to it, but heck, sometimes you just want to see the good guys beat the bad guys.
You want the black versus the white or vice versa.
Again, my argument is execution, right? So you have this kid in the opening scene who kills a Jedi. Okay, you're bad. And we normally associate the Jedi with good. Obviously, they flip that around later, where it's like, oh, Carrie-Anne Moss Jedi might be a dick and whatever. But it's like, but she's not heroic. Like, she's not being presented as heroic. She's being presented as stoic and all that shit. And again, that's a choice. Versus Saul, to me, is the through line of traditional Star Wars hope through the thing. He clearly knows something happened with May and Osha. He isn't they even say, like, your attachment to Osha, the Padawan says, your attachment to Osha is weird, right? Like, he looks at her like a child, like his own child. Yeah. And there's something interesting with that. And he says, I believe you. Like, he tells him, don't mess with her. Like, he defends her at every turn and subsequently, makes her part of the team. And they're still arguing, and stuff, because there are issues in the X amount of years. She's not been a Jedi. She left for a reason. We still need to get into that stuff. And, I just think you got 5 more episodes of this where, anything can happen. It could suck. It could be great. It could be whatever, right? But I'm pretty sure, that we're going to get some of those answers, Especially, look, the thing ends with a dude in a Kylo Ren mask and a red lightsaber. It's like, what the fuck else do you want? You know what I mean?
So I think we're right here. I think we're knocking on the door right now of prophet or loser, where FJ makes his predictions about what's going to happen in the show, and we discover along the way, all of us, whether or not FJ DeSanto is a prophet, someone who can actually predict the future, or a loser, someone who definitely does not. It's massive fail all around. FJ, loser.
I wasn't good with Ahsoka. Like I didn't have a good track record on Ahsoka. So
Ahsoka, that's, as I said earlier, a lot of my frustrations with the show was the lack of ability I had to analyze the actual lore that was being presented, because it was being presented to us like a piece of Swiss cheese with massive holes in it. And I just could not follow the threads. Ooh, the thread.
Yeah.
Ooh, the thread. I'm pulling the thread. I'm pulling the thread.
F.J. DeSanto, prophet or loser.
All right, FJ, lay one on us. We're 3 episodes deep. We've got 5 episodes left. Give us a prognostication, a wise one.
Couple of things. I think we're going to see the events of the 3rd episode from different angles.
Yes.
That's the first thing.
Will they actually identify whose angle it is? Because that would be helpful.
No, I think this was OSHA's, and maybe we get May, or we get Saul. Or,
Jason wants the scene focusing on the character whose perspective the flashback is going to be coming from, followed by a doodaloo, doodaloo, doodaloo,
yes,
doodaloo, and then flashback.
Or something. Because FJ, the visual language of this show was set up to be that OSHA was going in and out of these flashbacks and some of these visions and whatnot. So I don't think that it's totally out of line to have expected this to have been bookended by some sort of, some context as to whose mind we were in.
Yeah, and I think that's valid, and I think we're going to see that.
Okay.
There could be certain things like who killed all the witches. Like unless there was just an explosion, they died, and it's just bad execution. I thought it was. There's 2 things that I really didn't like about the episode. I didn't like them ending on May. Like I think they should have left it sort of vague. Like I'm not worried that she escaped because we know she's alive. Like we didn't need that, right?
Well, doesn't that negate, or doesn't that go against the theory that this is OSHA's vision if they end on May?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I think like you'll see what I'm saying. Like I don't think you'll see it. Like I don't think the whole episode, the 3rd episode, and whatever they do next, is like, hey, this entire thing is from May's point of view. I think there's going to be key moments where like May's locked up in the thing and the kid lights it on fire and someone else does that. Like that's the dumb version.
I see. We'll get snippets. They'll fill in those gaps.
Because there's got to be a moment where 2 sisters sort of meet and go, but this is what happened. Well, this is what happened, and they either agree or disagree, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, look, we've already set up the Jedi's guilt over whatever happened here. So I think we're going to find out why Torben was, guilty and easily killed himself. We still haven't gotten into the Wookiee and his story, etc. So there still needs to be the 2 attempts on their lives, meaning May's got to go try and kill the Wookiee, and she's got to try and kill Saul. So we're going to have those episodes of. This is the episode where she tries to do this, right? At a certain point, the Kylo Ren teeth mask guy is going to show up. I think I know who it is. I'm going to shut up about it.
Why? What are you going to shut up about? Do you know something?
The potion maker guy, right? Like it's got to be him. Like he doesn't come back in the 3rd episode. Like it's going to be him. Kimir. I think they call him Kimir. Yeah, like he's going to be the fake Ezra Miller looking guy, and I think he's going to be. I think it's going to be like a big reveal kind of thing of like, like May's going to be surprised by that. Osha's going to be, everybody's going to be surprised by this. Like, what the fuck? And, you know, all that stuff. And again, you need to go back to the title of the show, right? So, and this sort of ties into what Jason was talking about a little bit earlier. So you have this thing where it's like, the show's called The Acolyte. It's not called The Apprentice.
Yeah.
Right? It's not called Padawan. It's not, well, it's called Acolyte, which is very, very different, right? So I'm convinced whoever Teeth Mask, Kylo Ren fake looking guy is somewhat like a higher Sith's guy, right? Which could be Darth Plagueis, right? And it's Star Killer, right? It's Star Killer, like how Vader had Star Killer.
Right.
This guy, you know, like, I'm going to train you, and then we're going to take down the thing above us. I think there's a bigger bad beyond just that Teeth Mask guy.
I agree. I think Teeth Mask guy is the apprentice, and he's looking for his apprentice that he'll then use to try and take out his master.
Yeah, you know, because you have
Darth
this bit, and then I think there's going to be a thing. I don't know. This could just be a continuity bullshit thing. You have the bit. Is it in Phantom Menace when Kai ID Mundi's like, we haven't seen the Sith for like a millennia?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. How long's a millennium?
1,000 years.
1,000 years.
Right. This is 100 years before, and they're Sith.
Right.
How do they not know that? Right?
We've been asking ourselves that question for weeks.
We've seen some, you know, I don't think this is a secret, but I think in the trailer, like, I think Plo Koon is in the background of one of the shots.
Really?
You know, like, so there's, if you Google it, I think it pops up. And like, that's the other thing. I think we might see some familiar Jedi in this. I wouldn't shock me in the least if Yoda shows up at one point.
I used to think that Yoda was going to show up in this, and now I'm not so sure.
It might be too easy. You know, it might just be and my fan service brain going into overdrive. But
yeah,
I think we are going to see some familiar Jedi. I think there's more flashbacks to come.
I agree with that. A lot of that is
based on seeing more Carrie-Anne Moss in the trailers and stuff like that. Like, I remember, like, people, my wife, all these people are like, you paid all that money to Carrie-Anne Moss and you killed her in the first scene? I'm like, chill.
I feel that a certain amount of outrage. I heard a certain amount of outrage about that too. I had no idea Carrie-Anne Moss had such a loyal fan base. I mean, they really want to see more of Trinity there. What's that, FJ?
The Matrix has an audience. It's not
apparently, yeah, for sure, no doubt.
We talked about with Star Wars, but you know, she means something in that space, and that's why she's in it. But again, look, I'm not going to get into the execution of the show because I could nitpick that for another hour, right? Like, but what I can sit there and go, hey, this is a linear story. I'm interested in the characters and the mission and the story, etc. You know, I won't until it's over sort of do here's what I would have done kind of thing. I don't think that's fair to the show until you've seen the whole thing. You know,
I find it interesting you qualify a show that has the potential to be rife with flashbacks, and you classify it as a linear story.
Yeah, because you know why I classify it as a linear story? And that's the difference between this and Boba Fett. Boba Fett was a mess, right? Boba Fett was like...
It had its charm in certain moments. Now, come on.
No, but the problem, here's the two problems with Boba Fett, right? Where this doesn't have a problem.
Just two?
No, well, relevant to this portion of the conversation, which is, okay, Boba Fett did the Tusken Raider getting out of the Sarlacc pit flashback shit, and it didn't add anything to the narrative. Whereas if you had told it linearly and start with him in the Sarlacc pit, he gets out, he gets trained by the Tuskens. Hey, I'm going to be, you know, I go off and hang out with the Mandalorian all these years later, and now I'm going to go back and be the crime lord of the planet because I want to protect the people, right? That's basically the gist of the show, right? But it never quite happens. Hey, a bunch of Hutts show up and then do nothing. A bunch of biker kids show up and do nothing, right? And it's all over the place. And then, of course, as we know, it turns into Mandalorian 2.5 for X Men episodes, and doesn't service Boba Fett, and subsequently, the only fun part is the end of Boba Fett where everybody's teamed up fighting and there's a Rancor and he rides it and you get your fan service, right? So the difference between that and this show is that entire flashback episode was related to the story at hand. It featured the characters that we've already established, Saul, the girls, the Jedi, etc. And it's part of the mystery of we're going to keep dropping these breadcrumbs so you understand why this kid wants to kill these Jedi and what really happened. So in that regard, it services the show as a whole. This is actually, the other big problem is everybody wants a Star Wars movie. This is a Star Wars TV show. It's written like a Star Wars TV show, right? It's a TV show. Like, get over it. Like, the problem with the Marvel shows and why none of the Marvel shows work is they were movies that were chopped up into episodes, right? They don't work. The only two that sort of Mandalorian first season or two worked, and Andor is a TV show, right? It's a premium, giant TV show. Boba Fett was not that. Ahsoka was 4 episodes stretched into 8, and just sort of meandered a bunch because one thing I didn't mention before when Jimmy was getting into it about Ahsoka is Ahsoka still has its own baggage, right? The problem with Ahsoka is you go into Ahsoka, if you haven't watched Clone Wars, right, you don't know these characters. Right? Like, you don't know the importance of these characters other than Ahsoka. Like, when Hera shows up at the Rebel headquarters, right, to do whatever. Like, that's her first time back in how long? She's had kids, her husband died, all this shit. She helped save the galaxy. Like, people should be losing their minds that she showed up. No, it's like, oh, that's Hera, the rebellion hero. Like, that's what Force Awakens did really well. Han Solo, the rebellion general, the smuggler. Like, even if you'd never seen Star Wars before, like, we understood the importance of those characters, etc. Like, that's what Ahsoka's missing. Ahsoka acts on the assumption you've seen all the shit that comes beforehand over the X amount of shows, and the relationship between Hera and Sabine and all that stuff, where it's like, maybe being a little bit more on the nose isn't a bad idea in terms of, expressing, like the significance of the characters in particular. And that goes to what you were saying before. One of you guys were saying before, it's like, just give me character. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need 3PO showing up in a courtroom, right? Which is actually kind of cool. But, Hera should walk in and people should be like bricking themselves that this like sort of war hero has shown up. Like when even with the prequels, it was like, I understood these were heroes and, or they're significant. Even Count Dooku, which is like a really thin and sort of mildly underdeveloped character, you got enough info to know, okay, he trained Qui-Gon, so he's got to know what the hell he's doing. He defected. He's got to know what he's doing. Yoda's going to throw down with him, right? Like, one of the best scenes in Attack of the Clones is when Obi-Wan's floating around in the prison, and he basically tells him straight up, what have I told you? The galaxy's run by the Sith. And Obi-Wan's like, what? Get the hell out of here. And he's like, no, Qui-Gon would have understood. And by the way, Qui-Gon might have understood. You know what I mean? Now, don't get me wrong. Dooku, his eventual intention would be to probably take down Palpatine and take it over for himself.
Right.
Thinking he was a better option, lesser of two evils. But he was still evil. But at least, I walked out of that knowing who that character was, and I had never seen that guy before. Grievous is the same thing. It's like General Grievous, the droid army. What, the droid army? Oh, my God. And he shows up, he's a badass. Hera just walks in the thing and just goes to court. And it's like, at least when... in Acolyte, when in the opening scene, the kid challenges Carrie-Anne Moss. And by the way, I think there's a reason she's in that bar. I wouldn't be surprised if she's exiled at a certain point. That's another thing. She might be responsible for whatever happens and is exiled. Like, what is she doing hanging out and she's not at the temple and she's not...
It would make sense. Because Kelnaka is exiled. Kelnaka is exiled. Torben is sort of self-exiled in his meditation.
Yeah, they might be doing
Saul
that on
might
purpose.
be the only one that's active. I would...
The only reason I sort of contradict my own note is at some point I think she picks up the comm and says, somebody's here trying to kill Jedi. But,
Well, and Saul's a babysitter. I mean, Saul's got the Yoda gig. He's taking care of the younglings.
Yeah, because he's the naive guy. I bet you, like, the other three did some crazy shit that he doesn't know about. You know what I mean? Like,
right. He may not be.
That's why the others are exiled when he's at the temple.
Yeah, he may not be a guilty party. Yeah.
But just give you a key thing, which again, it gets all glossed over. Is like that kid shows up at the table in the bar and says to Carrie Ann Moss, like, I want to fight you. And everybody laughs at her because they know she's a Jedi. She'll kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the kid wins by outthinking her. That's awesome. You know, like that's, again, argue about the execution all you want, but the idea is really cool. You know what I mean? Like the idea of like, this kid beat you with an analog, you know, a freaking Jedi wizard with a light sword with an analog knife because you played on her, you know, being a cop and wanting to save that guy's life.
Right.
And all that shit. And there's a great bit where May could kill that guy and he's got a little kid and she doesn't do it. Like, that's awesome. Like,
it does. Yeah. It shows she has some heart. Yeah.
People aren't watching the show. What they're watching is what they're seeing is what they want to see or not see. And again, argue the execution. It doesn't work for everybody. I get it. Like we'll do another show, you know, 6 months from now where I'll tear into it and go, they should have done this. And if they had done it this way, it would have had more impact and all that stuff. But like, you want to argue on that Facebook group of yours, you know, like, I don't need to know like what you had. Like, okay, I ate my fish sticks and then I watched the thing and, you know, my wife made me a cup of coffee. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care about your life. Did you like the show or not? Like, and here's one. I don't need to know about your values. I don't give a shit, right? Like, just talk about Star Wars. Like, I didn't like the show because of this. Like, the second somebody goes, the agenda and the Lucasfilm and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, the problem is everybody's overthought it to the point. And like I said, did I say it on here or did I say it offline? Where this is like Solo. So the problem with Solo is all that bad will from Last Jedi carried into Solo. And if they put it out 6 months or a year later, it would have done infinitely better. I'm not saying they would have done a sequel or whatever, but it would have done infinitely better and been more well received.
I can't help but think that Kathleen Kennedy's comments about the male-dominated fan base,
that doesn't help.
Just a week prior to the show dropping, I can't help but think Kathy is almost manifesting this kind of behavior from fandom by making those ill-advised, poorly timed comments that really have, I think, a limited basis in reality to begin with. But yet, when she says it, it's almost like she's manifesting the reaction.
It's baiting. I think it's
yes, baiting is another word.
Because I was going to say too, FJ, and I 100% agree with you that I think that people should be paying more attention to the show. I would say that the writer, that the stars, and the PR apparatus there at Lucasfilm, they should be talking about the show instead of talking about first this, first that, and why everyone is breaking their arms, patting each other, patting themselves on the back for what they're accomplishing.
Horrible.
It has nothing to do with the story.
They're marketing this 5 years out of date.
So true. So true.
If the same show came out after the first season of Mandalorian, a quarter of the hate.
Yeah.
Quarter of it.
Yeah. I
Interesting. Why do you think that? But why do you think that?
Because I think there's been an erosion of goodwill over.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. And I mentioned that before the season even started, that there is a lack of fan confidence in Lucasfilm.
And again, to your point, those sound bites and press things are not helpful either. If this had come out in between Mandalorian and Andor, people be cosplaying as those characters at Celebration. People are going to be like,
oh, we'll see.
That's the other thing.
Of course.
You have a very vocal, group of people on social media. Like, how does that translate into the real world? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think there is going to be a subsection of the fan base, like there is with everything. They're going to dress up as the characters and want the toys and all that shit.
Yes.
But again, I don't think it connects with young people and all that stuff. Like, you see this, like, what the hell are they going to do to Skeleton Crew when it comes out? You know what I mean? Like, are they going to go easy on it because Jude Law's an actual movie star? recognizable, and which I think is a smart choice, right? Like,
yeah,
that's the other problem with a lot of these shows, with the exception of this one in particular, is I don't know any of these actors, right? Like, in retrospect, you probably should have paid a movie star beyond Carrie-Anne Moss a bit of money to play whoever.
I've heard rumors that Keanu Reeves is going to be making an appearance at some point throughout the season. And he's about as big as they get, I mean, but we'll see. Maybe those are just rumors.
If he does, okay, I'll buy Kyle a steak dinner.
Wait a second now.
Steak dinner.
How does Kyle get the dinner?
I'll buy the whole.
Is this part of your therapy? You buy charred meat for people, and that solves their mental crises.
I'll take the whole Facebook group to the Sizzler.
Well, I actually think that I found this conversation to be, well, it always is really enlightening and a lot of fun, but it was very helpful as well, because I think that you are, FJ, are a wee bit of sanity in a world that is gone slightly mad at times, and so coming in
and you're also a guy who knows how the sausage gets made too, so your insight is so super valuable. You're a hardcore Star Wars fan, you're an industry insider, and you help bring a little bit of balance to the Force.
Everybody relax. It's okay.
All right, man. Well, this has been a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun to talk to you. And this is just a glimpse of the excitement that happens in that text thread between the four of us.
Well, can I get to talk? The Kyle Siri, 3-pager shows up.
Jeez, yeah. Sometimes I got to put you guys on mute for a little while just so I could get on with my day-to-day life experiences.
I'm not joking. I told you guys this earlier this morning.
Yeah.
That I literally woke up to all those texts from you guys and Kyle. And it was like 6:30 in the morning. And I mean, he's got little kids, so I understand, right? And I forget which one he said that just pissed me off, but probably about the 70s thing. That, it's my first day back in the office, or one of my first days back in the office, because the dog passed away. I've been home. And so I said, I'm going to bring, the kids in the office some donuts and stuff. And I was so engaged in the conversation. I got out of the car, went to the donut place, for like 10, 15 minutes. I came back, the car was on. I forgot to turn the car off. I was so into the conversation.
In LA, and it stayed there.
My glasses are in there, all this shit. Then I look on Santa Monica Boulevard, and Blake is driving the car going,
He's just been waiting. He's been waiting for you to put your guard down. Oh my God. All right, man. Well, I've got Jim, I know you were taking notes. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 7. I've got a list of 7.
Well, we'll come back to it.
Predictions and theories that FJ has laid on us for future episodes of The Acolyte, and we'll have you on again once this is wrapped. I know we're going to have to...
Can we summarize? I just want to make sure...
Yeah. I'll tell you what I got. We'll compare notes here, and that way FJ can correct if I'm misinterpreting. You did say that episode 3, the gaps will be filled by some sort of reconciliation with the sisters, that the sisters will get together in a sense.
I say reconciliation. We'll get story things when they engage.
They engage, right. Reconciliation is a bad word, but they will engage in some sort of conversation and sort of check each other in terms of their what they experienced. We're going to find out why Torben was so tormented that he took his own life.
Yes.
We will see May try to kill Kelnaka.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You also said that we're going to see her try to kill Saul.
Yeah, because it's the four Jedi.
Right. But I'm okay. I'm going to put down both. I'll put down both because my thinking is that she's going to go after Kelnaka, and depending on whether she's successful there or not, will determine whether she gets a chance at Saul.
but we'll say Kelnaka and Saul. Big one, Chimere is the Sith that we see. Zipperface. Or as you call him, Teeth Mask. You also are saying that he is likely the apprentice of a bigger baddie that is out there in this universe at this time. You said that we'll see some familiar Jedi, maybe some cameos. You wouldn't be surprised if you saw Yoda. You do say that Plo Koon can be seen in some of the footage that's already been released. And then finally, more flashbacks to give us
different perspectives.
Yes,
more flashbacks from different perspectives. Yes.
Yeah. Well, by the way,
that's the list.
Can I just clarify that real quick, and then I'm going to go. Which is
okay.
When I say flashbacks, it could be the Force flashbacks, like in the first episode,
right?
Where the kids interact with the Force time
right.
shit.
Okay.
So it could be that, like as opposed to this episode, which was like a giant flashback. Right. It could be some of that.
All right. Awesome.
Perfect. Prophet or loser? What will you be, FJ? Will you be the prophet or will you be the loser?
I'm going to be just happy to be here.
You're going to be busting balls in the Facebook group, I'm sure.
I'm going on vacation next week, so everybody gets a break. So.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well, enjoy it. And hopefully you'll have time. You'll get Disney Plus there wherever you're going on vacation, so you can at least watch the episode.
I'll bring my laptop. So
there you go.
Okay. All right. Because you got to be involved in the text chain then hours after the thing debuts. It's just for the big blow up of the Jedi Council text thread.
All I'm going to leave you with one word, and then I'm literally going to hang up. And that word is something I said to somebody today who was annoying me. McClunky.
Wow.
And he's gone.
Out of there.
Wow. That was such a bold exit there.
Yeah.
With the McClunky and then gone. I mean, just gone.
Left us on the McClunky.
He's not kidding around, FJ. He's not kidding around, folks.
No,
so
definitely not.
Very insightful. Great to hear from FJ. Like I said, his value to us, beyond the great friendship we have with him, is the fact that, like I said, he's an industry insider and a hardcore Star Wars fan, and he's so level-headed about his approach to both. It's just great to be able to pick his mind, get his insights, and his predictions, of course, which were always fun, prophet or loser. But FJ really knows his you-know-what. Now, now that he's gone, I'm going to bleep myself. Help me out with this, Jason. Okay. FJ DeSanto really knows his...
Chewie, get us out of here!
Well, that's going to wrap things up for us here this week on Rebel Force Radio. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. Thank you to FJ DeSanto. Great catching up with FJ. I say catching you all up with FJ. We're lucky enough to hear from FJ multiple times a day. So, but it's nice to catch you all up with FJ.
It's a nonstop flow of FJ.
It really is.
But
lucky for us. FJ and Kyle. And, Kyle, I will say, no one has a bigger heart when it comes to Star Wars than Kyle Newman. That guy truly, his heart beats and he bleeds Star Wars. And I'm sure we'll be talking to Kyle because he's not going to let this go. He's going to have to come on and give his rebuttal to some of the things
he's going to.
Said. Yeah,
he's going to. I'm gonna let the series unveil itself a little bit more before we bring in Kyle.
Yeah, I think
he's too raw right now.
Yeah,
we need
somewhere around week 6 feels about right to bring Kyle in.
Not bad.
Right, right before the final 2 episodes, because by then we'll have a pretty good idea of whether FJ's logical way of processing all of this pays off. So anyway, so great to have heard from Fletcher earlier in the episode. Patreon is a great source for more Rebel Force Radio in your life, and who doesn't need that? So go over to patreon.com/RFR YouTube.com/Rebel Force Radio, or you can head to the Rebel Force Radio website and click on that Patreon banner in the right rail, and you'll be taken to all of your options, everything from $1 on up, so something to fit every budget, and it does get you more Rebel Force Radio, including exclusive podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. In addition to this podcast that you're listening to right here, absolutely commercial-free, and a video option. So the full show video is available for you on Patreon when you're at the All X member or above. If you like more Rebel Force...
Hi, Mom.
What?
I just said hi, Mom.
Oh, okay.
The video option.
Oh, video.
The video
okay.
option.
All right. I was like, wow, is Mama Mac there? It's a little late. If you like video, you can check us out on YouTube. That's where all of our after shows are. So if you subscribe and you like us there, you'll get notifications about when we go live. Like I said earlier, the after show for the Acolyte are Wednesday nights, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So we love to have you subscribe. We love to have you comment on our videos. Plus, we've been doing this a long time, and there's just a ton of content out there for you on YouTube. So if your ears perked up at Tori's song and you were wondering where does some of those references come from, a lot of them you'll find on our YouTube channel in the archives. You can follow us on social, Instagram, X, and Facebook. FJ was talking a lot about the official Facebook group. Woo, all kinds of conversation going on. You can be a part of it. You just got to answer a few simple questions. And you too could be chatting with FJ DeSanto on the Facebook group. The website, as I mentioned, rebelforceradio.com. But the main thing, if you want to help us out at Rebel Force Radio, the best thing you can do, costs you nothing, just do what you're doing right now. Listen to the podcast, share it with your friends and family. Whenever there's a new Star Wars series on TV, people start asking questions. Are you watching this Acolyte show? You watching this Acolyte show? So not only tell them that you listen to or watch the Acolyte show, but you all listen to the after shows and the podcast, and tell them Rebel Force Radio is a great source for their force. If your podcaster of choice allows you to leave a review, we love to have those too. We read them all. Good, bad, ugly, everything in between. Just one simple rule, please.
Make them good.
All right, that's it. We're out of here. We'll see you next time. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mac.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
McClunky.